Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be the start of a new series of videos. This will be the chapter analysis videos for the new Avatar novel, The Reckoning of Roku. So of course this one is going to be for chapter 1, Prologue, and the plan for this series is to do one video on every single chapter of this book. I've not counted how many chapters there are, but there will be a video on every single one of them. It's going to take a while to get through, but we will do it to try and pick out all of the key details from this book. So that's what I'm doing in these videos. It is part recap, part discussion / review. I'll be pointing out lore details like place names. Do we know characters from elsewhere? Just adding some nice context and commentary because I know my Avatar very well, and other people value the kind of extra insight that I can add. So if you just want to follow along in terms of what directly happens very specifically, that's one way to do it. When the book actually comes out and you have your copy, following along that way is also valuable, because I'm releasing this video and probably the first couple of chapters pre the book actually officially releasing, which is July 23rd. The only chapters you'll see pre-release will be the first probably 4 or 5 chapters, because they're all out via various previews for the book. Most of these you will find on Amazon. If you go to Amazon.com and the Reckoning of Roku listing, you can click read sample and you'll get mostly the first 50 pages of the book, but also Screen Rant has chapter 2 in full as well, so you can keep up with some of these early ones even before release. So there's that. Spoiler policy for this is obviously, because I know some people do follow through, I'm not just going to randomly tell you what happens at the end in the early chapters or anything like that. We're mostly going to be sticking to what happens in each chapter. I might bring specific details from future chapters forward if it aids with the discussion in terms of clarity of it's not a reveal of this thing later on, it just happens to be in that chapter, but it's actually useful to tell you about it now. Stuff like that can happen, and I think that's important as well, just with regards to keeping track of what's going on. It's a long-ish book, 360 pages. You have to keep a lot of stuff in check to follow it super closely. Final thing before we get going on this opening chapter is just that it's a long series. It takes a long time to do, so any help with the channel would be appreciated. I do have YouTube channel membership enabled if you wish to help support the channel. There are 2 tiers, the Light Spirit tier and the Avatar tier. At both tiers, you get access to loyalty badges as well as custom emojis that you can use in the comments and in live chats when I do live streams. And then specifically with the Avatar, the higher tier, you will get access to exclusive videos that I put up every so often. There's a pretty big backlog of them at this point. Most of them are not Avatar videos because I always put those ones up publicly. The only Avatar videos that are exclusive are Netflix Avatar live reactions for episodes 3 to 8. Because I think I put the first 2 up publicly, and then the other ones are exclusive. So that's there if you want to help support the channel. I'll mention this in the first couple of videos, but otherwise we'll get straight into the content. So here we are, Reckoning of Roku, Chapter 1 Prologue. Obviously, it's the first Roku novel, Chronicles of the Avatar Book 5. It's the first novel written by Randy Rabai. The first novel not written by F.C. Yee. Straight away, I would let people know, just from a broad review sense, I think the writing style is very similar. And I don't think too many people are gonna note any, I think, massively obvious differences in style that will annoy them. I think stylistically throughout the book, in terms of its presentation of information, character arcs, it's very much that kind of standard YA style of book, and in my mind, I don't think it's super noticeable that there's a switch up necessarily. So I think that's good praise that it was able to just kind of slot in, and the series continues like clockwork in my mind. So, what are we doing here in the Roku novel? You can probably tell from the cover, and if you've read the description, we're dealing with Roku early on in his training. This is shortly after he has started his journey training to be the Avatar, and that is exactly the case. We're dealing with 16-year-old Roku throughout this book. It's most of the story takes place, 3 months after he has started his journey. Specifically, this prologue opening chapter here is obviously set 3 months in the past, and is basically right after the announcement of Roku as the Avatar. So if you have watched the Avatar and the Fire Lord, so Avatar Book 3, Fire, Episode 6, the Avatar and the Fire Lord, you'll have some context for this opening chapter quite heavily. So we of course know what Sozin at this age looks like, what Roku at this age look like. We have moments like them sparring with each other, firebending. That's kind of cool, and this is actually a fun reference to this scene in this chapter. You have the actual moment that has basically just happened where the Fire Sages announce Roku as being the Avatar. Again, notably, Roku and Sozin share the same birthday, and so that's an interesting note as well. There was a possibility Sozin might have been the Avatar because they were born so close together. And then we will get quite heavy reference later on in the chapter to this scene here, which is Sozin giving Roku the Crown Prince artifact, the kind of hairpiece, and we'll see that kind of basically happens off screen in between the middle of this chapter. So Avatar and the Fire Lord, if you do a rewatch of that just before this, there's some nice little context that you will get from it. So what we're doing as we start this one, it's a Sozin point of view chapter, and there are other Sozin point of view chapters as we continue. He actually plays a pretty significant role in the book. It's obviously still Roku's book primarily, but they give you enough Sozin that it makes sense, because in a way this era is defined by the Avatar and the Fire Lord. So it makes a lot of sense that they focus on Sozin. The idea that Roku being announced as the Avatar affects Roku. It changes his life, but it also changes Sozin's life to a certain degree, because Roku was the closest friend he has ever, will ever have, basically. And how does Roku going away for all this time, how's that going to affect Sozin? That's the core concept here at the start. So we're here at this party effectively celebrating the fact that the Fire Nation has a new Avatar. For the first time in a long time, since Avatar Zito, the Fire Nation have a new Avatar. It's taken quite a while, especially because the previous Avatar, Kyoshi, had such a long life, living to 230. It's been quite a wait getting back around in the cycle to the Fire Nation. So we're at that basic party here celebrating this announcement. But for Sozin, it is not a celebration. Why would he be happy about the fact that this means his best friend has to go away? And he's going to lose his only real friend that he has. He's not going to be alone because he's the prince. He's always going to have people around him. But a true friend, not so much, and that's the significance of the Roku-Sozin dynamic, of course. So anyway, at the party, everyone else is having a good time. He walks across the party. You get some references here as we get introduced to his family, some of which we know, some of which we don't know. So a lot of this is new. So his father, Fire Lord Taiso, Taiso, and his mother, Lady Hazei. Not sure about the pronunciation, Hazei. So those are names we had not heard prior to this book actually releasing. So I'll bring up this here so you can get a sense for what Fire Lord Taiso actually looks like. So these are the portraits. This is from the Avatar art book. So we have the portraits going right to left. We have Ozai, of course. Then we go backwards and we have Azulon. Sozin, of course, is in the middle, but this is an older Sozin compared to our 16-year-old Sozin in this chapter. And then before that, of course, was a mysterious character. Who is this? They have finally named this character. This is Taiso, Sozin's father. And now it just leaves the one on the end, Taiso's father as being an unnamed Fire Lord who we don't actually know. We don't get the name in this book either, but there is a brief visual of what Fire Lord Taiso actually looks like here. We do learn a little bit in pieces about him. If you've read the Avatar Legends RPG, the Roku section, you know a little bit of context for him as well. He doesn't get a huge focus in the book, but you get a sense for what he's like as a Fire Lord. Then as he walks past his parents, he also walks past his sister, Princess Zaysan. Again, if you've read the RPG, you are familiar with this character and you know already that Sozin has a sister, and it shouldn't be a surprise to you. If you maybe haven't read the RPG, him having a sister is probably a big reveal to you, but this is the first time that Zaysan has been mentioned in non-RPG material here. So it's just described here that Zaysan is stood at the edge of the Turtle Duck Pond, deep in conversation with her science tutor, who is a slender, brown-skinned Ember Island native whose rope dart was rumored to be as sharp as her mind. This character, the science tutor of Zaysan, is going to be named Dallasay. They tell you this in a later chapter, but you can almost forget that this character was alluded to in the opening chapter, so just to connect the dots a little bit there, Dallasay gets roughly introduced at this point here. But anyway, he walks through the party and spots where Roku is, and he's basically been sort of like cornered effectively by the head of a minor clan, as well as his young daughter, and effectively it's the idea that people are trying to arrange marriages with the new avatar, that sort of idea. So Sozin steps in to save Roku because he knows his best friend is not great in these sort of situations. He's not just going to stand his ground and be like, hey, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to make any deals right now. Thank you, but I need to move on. Roku's not really going to do that. He's a bit too lacking in confidence to make that happen. So Sozin steps in and is just like, I need to take Avatar Roku away. Fire Lord Taiso requires his attention, and the guy and his daughter kind of head off. You can see that the daughter is relieved just as much as Roku is. She wasn't really into this either. And they add on to the idea of like Roku being a little bit like naive about situations like this, where Roku's like, oh, what does your father want with me? And Sozin's just like, he doesn't actually want you. Please understand this. I just saved you here. Is Roku a little bit too trusting at this point? Probably. Like, you can see the contrast between the two, that this is an aspect of him that Sozin likes because it's different than other people and how they interact with Sozin, but it also is a little bit maybe much for someone like Sozin. So interesting stuff there. The fireworks are about to start, so they get up onto the kind of the roof of the hall basically to get a really good look, and they have basically a conversation up here together. But first, Sozin remembers what had happened shortly after the announcement of Roku as the Avatar. What did his father think of this announcement? And straight away, we get the idea. Taiso, what he says to his son is, I'm disappointed it's not you, but I'm not surprised. However, you may still be of great use to our nation. Tend to your friendship like a fire, then learn to bend it to your will. So straight away, there's the idea of, okay, Roku and Sozin, they were born on the same day, they're the same age. There was a disappointment that there was a chance the Fire Lord's son became the Avatar. That's a crazy concept sort of by itself. That theoretically a few minutes either way and maybe Sozin ends up as the Avatar, which is interesting to think about. But that isn't the case. So instead it's kind of like, oh, you're friends with the Avatar. If you're not the Avatar, then use that friendship to your advantage. You know, really get the Avatar on our side as a nation. Effectively, he's telling his son to begin to manipulate your friendship for the Fire Nation. And does Sozin want to do that? Not really. He doesn't like the idea that effectively he's being commanded by his father to make this happen, change the dynamic of his friendship with Roku, and he doesn't want to do that because Roku is a true friend to him. He's a true friend to Roku. But the idea is that Sozin is, because of his ambitions, ultimately kind of going to have to go in that direction, because even though at this stage we get the sense of this Sozin who is a true friend to Roku, he does still have his ambitions. He still thinks there's so much he can do when he gets to step up as the Fire Lord, and setup needs to be done now to make that happen. And there's some interesting stuff that we'll get to with Sozin as we go through the book. They begin to get talking, and it gets brought up of like, oh yeah, you're too scared to speak to Ta Min, and there's a joke about the fact that, hey, like, you were almost in an arranged marriage there with that like 12-year-old girl from that clan, and you need to speak up for yourself, basically. And he kind of points out that like, you know, this is the night to kind of talk to Ta Min. Like, you've been announced as the fire avatar. Like, that's going to impress her. Why don't you talk to her? But Roku's like, I'm leaving tomorrow. Like, what's the point in kind of like starting a relationship now when it's immediately like long distance if anything was to happen type thing. So Roku's kind of down about this, because in the same way that Sozin is aware this means Roku's leaving, Roku knows that this means he's leaving. And so we're going to get here Roku's initial reaction to like, what does it mean that he is the Avatar? When he's this not super confident character who kind of doesn't really want this responsibility. There's a joke here from Sozin about like, you know, Avatar or not, you're still so ugly. Ko wouldn't take that face even if you tried giving it to him for free. And it's interesting, like, is Ko so well known a spirit that anyone would reference him? But you kind of get the context from the book that actually Sozin reads a lot of ancient texts. He knows about the legends of the world. Sozin specifically referencing Ko is a thing that he would do, which I think is quite interesting as like a character point for Sozin. Is the interest in the kind of ancient history of the world is an interesting one. But they get joking about that, of course. They have a little bit of they get up, they have a pretend sparring match on the roof. Roku nearly falls off the roof, and so we get the kind of reference to this style of thing where in the episode they're sparring, and Roku basically loses because he trips over a tree root, and Sozin like grabs him before he falls. And it's something similar here of like, Sozin is the one to grab him before he falls off the roof, and they laugh about it here, of course, the near miss of like, whoa, you know, he fell off and we nearly lost the Avatar like the day he was announced. And they get back to talking again after this, and this is where it gets a little bit more kind of serious. We get to the root of the issue here. Roku's like, I never thought it would be me. Sure, we all knew it would be someone from our year, our nation, but still, it's not like anyone actually thinks it's going to be them, right? And that's Roku saying something that makes a lot of sense, but of course, Sozin knows that his father's disappointed it wasn't him, so for Sozin it means something kind of different. Maybe I should have just told the Fire Sages no thanks as a bit of a joke, but yeah, that wouldn't have gone over very well. And Sozin tries to get him to see the positive side of being the Avatar, of like, you're going to get to see the world, you know, think of all the abilities you're going to get to master, all the experiences you're going to have. You're going to get to meet all of the world leaders, and you're going to be effectively the most powerful person on the planet. Everything you do will be history. But Roku's answers to all of these things are just basically like, well, if I have to learn abilities, that means I'm going to be expected to fight. I already know a world leader effectively in you, Prince Sozin. Like the idea of, I just want a simple life. I'm, Sozin tries to point out the idea, you're destined for greatness. I don't care about greatness. And in Sozin's head, he's like, again, it's the idea of, I like that Roku is not ambitious because it's part of why we can be very close friends, but it's getting kind of excessive to a certain degree. I'm frustrated by the fact that you in a way can't just praise yourself for the things you actually are good at or and stuff like that. So, it's an interesting dynamic here where I think this makes a lot of sense for it. Whereas like Sozin deep down has incredible ambitions, and the idea is if he did end up being the Avatar, he would not be like this really, like, at all. He'd be taking full advantage. But Roku, as the person who never wanted it. And even now that he has it, is like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. That's effectively what he says next. What if I can't do it? And we'll get onto that in just a second. One other thing that Sozin offers as like, hey, here's something that might be a benefit coming out of this, is that at least you'll get away from your parents. Talking to Roku. So the idea of like Sozin knows Roku doesn't have a great relationship with his parents. What's that about? And we'll get some context in just a second here. So what if I can't do it? And then Sozin's like, wait, what? Nothing, never mind. Sozin just says, you'll be great. If this is because of your brother, it's not, if you say so. And then we get onto something else. So Roku doesn't want to talk about his brother because of what happened. And so we basically get the reveal here. It's not really a spoiler for a later chapter, but the idea of Roku had a brother, and his brother is now gone. His brother died in the past, and we'll learn about that as we go through the chapters. And the idea is, is your lack of confidence, does it relate to whatever happened to your brother? And the fact that Roku interrupts Sozin for like the first time and is like, no, don't want to do this. In a way, the one time he's a little bit like, we're not talking about this, is over this. It's clear Sozin has hit the nail on the head here of like, it is to a certain degree about what happened to his brother. But that's a reveal by itself. This is the first time we've ever had an Avatar who is confirmed to have a sibling. Now, obviously, the sibling is now dead, but still, we had that dynamic to a certain degree kind of present here. So, what's going on with Roku? Not a great relationship with his parents, something happened to the brother, and then you sort of wonder, is what happened to the brother, is that what has affected the relationship with the parents? And we'll find some of this stuff out as we go through the book. So some unexpected sort of like family drama style stuff for Roku here that we couldn't have called prior to this because we didn't know any of this stuff. So what they talk about next is Roku's like, how do you do it? How do you basically not suffocate under the weight of everyone's expectations? And Roku basically points out that I've just been found out to be the Avatar, and I'm struggling after only like a day of this. You've been a prince your entire life, so you've had similar expectations your whole life, and you seem okay, you seem fine. And so Sozin is like, with anyone else, I would just say, I'm amazing, I'm great, I'm Prince Sozin, of course I can handle it. But he gives Roku the honest answer, and that's, who says I'm not scared about the expectations? And he's like, all the time I am. How do you deal with it? And he says, I pretend I'm not, and you should learn to do the same. Does it work? And the answer here is pretty nice from Sozin. If my closest friend in the world couldn't tell, then it appears so. So that's an interesting one, because we see that Sozin is struggling to a certain degree to live up to his father's expectations, especially when one of them is, get the coin flip on if you were born to be the Avatar right. And it presents a little bit of an idea of that's part of his dynamic with his father, of just his father has pretty intense expectations for him, and has he lived up to them so far? He's managed to hide his feelings about a lot of those expectations, and that's part of the dynamic here. So they get silent for a little bit. They watch the remainder of the fireworks, of course, and then they realize, okay, we need to get back here. People are probably wondering where we are because we're up on the roof. No one else is on the roof. Roku says, before your father executes the panicked servants he probably tasked to find us. If only that were a joke, is what Sozin says. So Taiso is potentially likely to do something like that. And he says, okay, I'll let you go pack. I'll stop by your room and say a proper goodbye, because I probably won't get the chance to say something more significant in the morning, because it's the official Avatar departure ceremony basically coming up. And they say they walk off together. This is where we get the cut, and the idea is in between the scene that we just saw there and the scene we're about to get is where this scene happens. So we don't get like this from Sozin's perspective. This just happens off screen, but we do get some context about like, okay, here's how I felt during this scene in what we're about to get here. So the next morning, it is the official departure ceremony. They again highlight that it's the first one of these since Avatar Zito. And it's noted everyone's here, basically. Roku, his parents, Sozin, the royal family, Sister Daisha, his airbending master, Roku's to-be airbending master, is here. The fire sages, generals, the heads of prominent clans, as well as commoners, pilgrims, and stuff like that are all here. And the ceremony here is effectively that Roku has to walk down the line of all these important people and bow before them. I think the idea is, what way is it meant to be? I think the idea is that, yeah, he has to bow to each of these people. They will then bow back to him. But it has to be reversed when it gets to the Fire Lord specifically. But when he gets to the Fire Lord, he still does it the same way. And it's a little bit of a breach of etiquette, but it's the Avatar's day, effectively, so they let him away with it. Is a fun little detail there. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff here. Like, Roku says goodbye to Zaison. There's no dialogue between the two of them, so we still don't know like how well they knew each other necessarily. Zaison doesn't get brought up that many times over the course of the book, so clearly the idea is it makes sense to reference her, but we'll maybe more deal with stuff with her, maybe book 2, if we are in fact getting a second Roku novel, which, who knows, we'll see what happens there. But the idea is, it's going as normal. Sozin's just like thinking about it, but then Roku gets up to Sozin, and Sozin's obviously basically like second in line, the prince and then the Fire Lord, and Roku's in front of him about to say officially goodbye. This is where it hits Sozin that he's leaving. My only friend is leaving. And there's just a silence between the two of them. Like, the ceremony kind of comes to a halt temporarily like this. And Taiso has to be like, like, continue the ceremony basically to get it going. This is when the bow goes kind of backwards with the Fire Lord. But anyway, and we get some details here. Sozin's father gave one of his long-winded speeches. Roku, gets on the Sky Bison, ready to say goodbye, basically. And this is where it gets noted that, so Roku is wearing the Crown Prince artifact headpiece that Sozin had just given him, this scene. And we get this super interesting reveal about this scene, which is this. Giving the artifact to Roku had been Fire Lord Taiso's idea. A tangible reminder of where his true loyalties should lie, Fire Lord Taiso had told Sozin. A leash, if you will. So that's a crazy reveal that Sozin didn't do it himself, but Sozin's reaction to this, I think, is interesting as well. Sozin felt a pang of guilt, but when he returned Roku's gesture with a small nod, he told himself that he had given it to Roku because it felt right to do so, and not out of some intention to manipulate. So, even though the original idea was Taiso's, Sozin still kind of goes along with it in the sense of like, no, I'm actually going to do this in the proper friendship way, and I won't take advantage of this in the way that my father wants me to. Now, the idea, as we kind of go through the book, is that ultimately we're going to see, almost immediately, the idea of the dynamic does shift, of Sozin realizing that, like, oh yeah, I want to do this thing. My friend's the Avatar. And he kind of thinks to himself, like, oh, I kind of immediately do need to kind of use Roku to my advantage. And you see the ambitions begin to come out, and they get in the way of how he values the friendship to a certain degree. And we have to remember that as much as it's a pretty nice presentation of Sozin, he doesn't seem too bad here, he is still effectively being like trained, manipulated by the kind of evil line of Fire Lords to be this kind of brutal leader to a certain degree, and we know who he is going to become, and you can't kind of forget that in all of it. You wonder throughout these chapters the idea of, well, if Roku didn't leave, would things have gone differently for Sozin? If Roku was just there in the Fire Nation with him, alongside him, always there, would Sozin have turned out better? Or would there have been just no one to directly oppose Sozin when whoever was the actual Avatar at that time came around? And this is where the idea of like Roku not being confident, but in a way gaining confidence because he becomes the Avatar, allows for there to be some opposition to Sozin, whereas theoretically there might not have been any opposition. But that's the kind of what ifs of the situation. So yes, we get the goodbye. Roku goes off to the air temple, and Sozin then goes off to his room. He keeps up appearances, and then he kind of like breaks down when he gets back to his room. Like it says here, the mask crumbles. His friend was gone. Sozin would never be actually alone because he could just, he can have anyone he wants to come dine with him, train with him, play Pai Sho with. But his true friend is gone, and he kind of, in a way, doesn't feel like he will get that same level of friendship with anyone else again. The sole person in this world with whom he could be completely honest, his friend was gone. And then we get a very interesting final sequence of this chapter. Curse the fire sages who spoke the unwelcome announcement. Curse the air nomads for requiring Roku to move to their temple. Curse a world that provided such friends only to snatch them away. The more Sozin thought about what he'd lost, the more Roku's rooftop words from last night rang through his mind. The more his sorrow began to simmer. Roku was right. It should not have been him. So I like the multiple use of the words kind of curse there, of like he's going back and being like, you should never have announced him as the Fire Lord, even though that's what their job was. I can't believe the training has to work this way, but that is how the Avatar is trained. And then like cursing his fate of like, you give me friends, but friends that go away. And then it's very interesting that it's phrased as such friends, and not like curse a world that provided a friend like this and then took that friend away, like singular. It's referring to multiple, and this relates to bits and pieces we've got from the chapter here of like what happened to Roku's brother. And then if Roku had a brother, did Sozin know that brother? Like you're asking these sort of questions, and is that what's being referred to here of like this is a secondary loss for Sozin, is it potentially? That he lost a friend in the past, but now Roku basically being lost to him here as well. And this is what's on the back cover of the book. It has that, curse a world that will provide such friends only to snatch them away. It's a Sozin quote. That's the big quote on like the description of the book, which I think is an interesting idea. With the idea being that, okay, Roku's gone. How does this affect things? Does this allow Taiso's influence to come over Sozin more? Or does this just kind of in a way like free up Sozin to go full rein into his ambitions? Because now suddenly he doesn't have the nice character around him who sort of kept him grounded and in check. That's sort of the idea that you're thinking about when it comes to, Sozin at this point. But that is the opening chapter there. We're obviously going to skip ahead after this 3 months later and establish where basically a lot of the present day stuff is about to happen. On the Sozin side of things, we will have POV chapters with him. We actually don't have to wait too long. I think like chapter 4 is a Sozin POV chapter, and that's super interesting. That's probably the first, like, I think, massive, like, giant chapter in the book that is like, okay, this is probably the one they should have maybe led with in terms of showing us what the book was really about and what's so interesting about it. But so far, so good. Like, the dynamic between Sozin and Roku feels like 306, but the expansion that you get here of them talking a little bit more is really nice, how they connect it to that episode, but will give you more. And the world building stuff of like, okay, Fire Lord Taiso, here's Sozin's mother, Zaysan's in the background. We're not doing stuff with her, but just that she's there. If you are familiar with the lore, it's cool that she is there. Ta Min is referenced again here, and we will get stuff with her in the book. So that's going to be cool to explore. And yeah, already one chapter, and you already I've gotten, I think, quite a nice character exploration just surrounding the idea of how an announcement of an avatar can immediately change the direction of like two characters, change the avatar's life themselves, but also their friends, and in this case the prince, the future Fire Lord. And Both characters characterized quite well. Even Roku in a Sozin POV chapter, getting some nice stuff with just his talks about, wanting the simple life and not really wanting the power or the privilege of being the Avatar. That's not who Roku is. He's not ambitious, but he's going to have to step up in this role, and we kind of know where he will go as an Avatar. He will go on to become a well-respected Avatar across the world. Also, interestingly, in terms of the whole, will he be a loyal Avatar to the Fire Nation or not? We know he basically becomes an Avatar who is known for really understanding and respecting all 4 nations, because he lived in all of them. He did the standard training, but that is still to come. This is a Avatar who has been a Fire Nation noble his whole life, now suddenly going to train with the Air Nomads. That's a giant change for Roku. These are the things you're thinking about as you kind of follow this up, of course. Yeah, that's been the chapter 1 analysis. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the opening chapter of this book. But yes, that's been it. Thanks for watching, and bye.